Good morning and welcome to SimWorld today. It's an audio edition here on a Monday morning, but we still have got a SimWorld U 3-pack for you on a Monday morning. We're talking top 25, we're talking Princeton, and maybe are there some doubts in there, and what's Iowa to do after over the weekend it was announced that Lamarian Sherwood expected to miss at least a month, likely more. But let's start with the top 25, where Duke remains atop the list. Alabama, Texas, Villanova, and Kentucky round out a top five that looks identical to what it looked like the week before. In fact, the top six all stays the same. The newcomers, though, Memphis climbs up to number 7 from number 10. Mississippi State makes their climb from teetering on the edge of falling all the way out of this thing all the way up to number 8. Iowa stays at 9, and UCLA rounds out the top 10. They move up from number 14. The Goners, Georgia Tech, and Princeton both falling out of the top 25 and some movement elsewhere. What's the big takeaway here? And to me, the big takeaway is a shuffling at the tail end of the top 25. We're getting Memphis in there, Mississippi State back in there, and UCLA. Memphis was already in there, but to me, we're starting to see this, and we're getting into Princeton a little bit more, but we're starting to see a little bit more of who some of these teams are. UCLA has been fantastic, 7 straight wins, and it feels like they're finally getting some of that recognition. You look across college basketball, none of the conferences have any semblance of a hierarchy. We can sit here and we can debate and say, no, there's a hierarchy atop the ACC because it's definitely Duke, or we can look at the SEC and you can pick your poison, and all that's technically true, but we're talking about logistically, statistically. None of the conferences are actually all that decided, really, except for one, and that's UCLA, who's 6-0 in conference play. They have a 2-game edge on both Utah and California. They've been playing their best basketball, and Jalen Snow is probably a top 7 pick. He's flirting with potentially being in the top 5. The tests are coming for UCLA. They've got Cal in a couple days, and then they've got already in the bag a win against Utah. So you've got the head-to-head against Utah. So what is a 2-game statistical lead is technically a 3-game lead. And you've got a head-to-head coming up against Cal, where you could really start to put away the Pac-12. And they're finally starting to get recognition within the top 25. To get up to 10, this is a team that's kind of hovered in that mid-range period for much of the season. But 7 straight wins, that starts to put them into that upper echelon, right? The Dukes, the Alabamas, Texas, Villanovas, Virginia Techs. Those are the teams that string together long winning streaks. UCLA now joins that exclusive group, and they're doing it at the absolute right time. There's also, I think, maybe a question mark from Iowa. I think it's very telling that they're staying at number 9 and not moving. I think the SP is looking at them and saying, we want to see what you look like. We're not going to, I would not have been shocked, I should say, if they had bumped out of the top 10. If they had fallen from 9 to, let's say, 12, I'm just throwing a number out there, because you look and say, well, you don't have Lamarian Sherwood anymore, right? You're not the same basketball. You're not a number 9 ranked team in the country without Lamarian Sherwood. That would be the expectation. But I think the SP is looking at this and saying, prove us right or prove us wrong. We're going to leave you. Is it a cop-out? I don't think it is, because I think Iowa put together a great tail end of that basketball game. They have other good pieces, but we're going to find out a lot more about Iowa, and we're going to get to them in a second as well. But I think the SP looked at them and said, no, we want to see what you look like without your number 1 guy, because right now we're just not quite sure. Other movement within the top 25. Butler goes up 6 spots. They were 21. They're now at number 16. Kind of interesting. I think this has been traditionally an SP group that has steered away from moving teams down. But how about this? Georgetown won last week. They fell down from 19 to 20. Louisville makes a big jump up, and I think that's part of it. Kansas, last week, they won against Oklahoma State. They went from number 16 to number 17. Gonzaga, they won last week against St. Mary's. They went from number 20 to number 21. This was an interesting week because we saw teams keep the status quo, keep winning, but actually falling in the top 25. Now, these aren't like cascading drops by anyone. North Carolina lost, and they fell 1 spot, but they lost a tough home game to Duke. but it's because Louisville makes a big jump up. They go from 18 to 15, and it's not such a big jump from the numbers, but they added another top win to their resume. Remember, this is a team that beat Kentucky, and they just beat Georgia Tech again this past week. They are playing really good basketball. Their record, I think, is a little deceiving there at 13-8. But they're actually playing, and this shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. They've got really good pieces. But you now look, they've got to win against a Georgia Tech squad. They've got to win actually twice against Georgia Tech, and now they're going to get a shot against Virginia Tech to add to this resume. So you've got 2 wins over Georgia Tech. You've got the win over Kentucky sitting in your back pocket. You've got a win over Memphis, who's now a top 25, or rather a top 10 team. This is a basketball team that's playing exceptionally well. They just get that win, and that's why we see some of these teams in the top. Overall, I'm not surprised by any of this. I think the team worth watching, though, is Iowa. Why? Let's get to the next part. Announced by Samuel Charles, Lamarian Sherwood expected to miss at least a month with a sprained elbow. He's going to be reevaluated in 4 weeks. Obviously, he's not coming back in 4 weeks. I talk about this actually later on Monday in the podcast. This is a big stretch. I talk about it in a different way, but this is a really big stretch for the Iowa Hawkeyes. You look at their schedule coming up, it does not get any easier for Iowa. So coming up, they've got Minnesota, who is right now the number 25 ranked team in the country. Illinois, who's tied for the number 1 seed in the Big Ten. Michigan State, who just fell out of the top 25, the one team that doesn't make it into the next week, but they were number 23 until they lost to Indiana, who Iowa plays after that, and then Ohio State, Purdue, Rutgers. This is not an easy path forward for Iowa. You're playing literally, so in this order, not in this order, as you look at the standings, Iowa has to play Minnesota, Illinois, Purdue, Indiana. Those teams are all in the top 6 in the Big Ten. That's going to be challenging. Yeah, Ohio State's 1-3. Yeah, Rutgers is 0-3. Maybe you feel decent about those games, but unfortunately for Iowa, you don't get Ohio State until March 31st. You don't get Rutgers until April 14th. On the immediate horizon is Minnesota, Illinois, Michigan State, Indiana. Those are all teams that are going to be and are contending for the Big Ten championship, and you aren't going to get your best player in any of those. That's disastrous. This is a disastrous run. Iowa's going to be making the Hoopsteria run, but this is now changing. The outlook could potentially change for this Iowa team from being a number 2, maybe number 3 seed. I mean, they're number 9, so you just look at the numbers, right? 1 through 4, there's going to be some changes, of course, but you would expect 1 through 4 are your 1 seeds. 5 through 8 are your 2 seeds. 9 through 12 are your 3 seeds. That's the range Iowa's cooking in, right? They're cooking in we could be a 2 seed, we could be a 3 seed. I think there's a very real chance this team falls to number 5, number 6. If they can keep their head above water, and they've got games coming up this coming week, March 4th against Minnesota, and March 11th is Illinois. They can keep their head above water. Maybe they can get Sherwood back in mid-April, and you get him for the closing run of, let's call it, Penn State, Maryland, and Rutgers, which are the final 3 games of the regular season for Iowa. If not, this is a team that might be staring down a mid-conference or a mid-seed in Hoopsteria. That's not good for a team that was looking to make a deep run. And let's close this thing out with Princeton. Princeton picks up their 2nd straight loss of the regular season. Not only does that hurt them in the American Conference, where they are now a half game behind SMU, who they, by the way, lost to, so they're really a game and a half behind. They're one behind them in the win column, one fewer win. But this is a really bad stretch now for Princeton. They've lost 2 games. This is the 2nd time this season they've lost 2 games in a row. The last time that happened, it was a 4-point loss to Wisconsin and a 11-point loss to St. John's. These 2 losses, to SMU by 23 and to Jackson State at home by 15, are not good losses. The high road, or the good vibes for Princeton, it's kind of why I always said I like the story. I don't believe that it's something that's going to be lasting very long for Princeton. This is why. Their offense is really middle of the road. They don't have anyone you can turn to. Their best player is sophomore Tyshawn Penn. He's a 2nd-round pick. I really think he should be coming back next season. That's it. Yes, you have Bruno John Misty. Yes, you have Alika Matson scoring in double figures, but this is not a high-powered, potent offense. It's a team that needs to get inside, the fifth best shooting team inside, or field goal percentage team in the season. But this is a group that relies on a top 20 defense, number 19 in the country in opponent points per game. That's what they rely on. And in these last couple games, they have to play slow. They're very much like Butler. They need to play slow tempo games. When the scores started getting up there, and we saw it against we saw it against SMU, we saw it against Jackson State, the score started ramping up. They could not keep pace when their threes don't fall, and they're so reliant on scoring inside. The last two games have not been good for the Princeton Tigers. What's next? Well, there's still a shot for this. You've got matchups with Houston, Wichita State, and Davidson. So Houston is at 3-3. Wichita State is at 3-3. Davidson is at 3-3. It's not impossible for Princeton to get back up there and get into the number 2 spot, but at number 14, this feels more of where they should be sitting. They can right the ship, but you're starting to see them settle into who they are, and I think that for them is a 5, is maybe a 4 seed. I thought at one point they were a 3. We did the seeding, and they were up there at 3. I liked them there. These last 2 games, they have just simply not looked like that team. All right, that's our show. We're coming back to you Tuesday morning, where we're going to have a huge day Tuesday afternoon in college basketball, a CBS triple header. You've got Georgia and Kentucky, number 5 Kentucky. You've got a lot of top 25 teams in action. Second game is Texas A&M and Auburn. Third game of this triple header is Gonzaga and UNLV, and that is a huge one in the Mountain West. This one could have been your game of the week. UNLV and Gonzaga playing for first place in the Mountain West. Instead, our game of the week, of course, is the Big 12 clash between Texas and Dayton. That one comes up later on in the week. That one's on Thursday at 8:30, March 6th. Dayton and Texas, but a huge night on Tuesday. We'll preview a lot of that, and of course, here Monday night we got Duke going to Virginia, Ohio State, and Michigan State, and Penn State, Wisconsin. Duke trying to continue to lay claim to their number 1 spot in the country. All right, we appreciate you tuning in. We're back here on a Tuesday morning, audio version only on this Monday, but we appreciate you riding with us all the same here on SimWorld TV, the only place you can see the game, be the game.